I woke up from a 10-year coma, and it was anger that roused me. I don't know when it started, but there were always these floating comments in front of me. Wake up, heroine. Your nanny has taken your place as the mistress of the house. She's living in your house, sleeping in your bed, cuddling your man, and even beating your child. My temper flared up instantly, and I sat up from the hospital bed, startling the doctors and nurses. When I got home, I saw the family having a happy dinner. And my daughter was skinny and sharing a food bowl with a dog. I overturned the table with a backhand and smashed the house to pieces. I didn't let anyone off. A slap for the little ones, 2 slaps for the older ones, and I kicked the ones in between. Their child yelled and demanded that I get out, so I grabbed the man's hair and turned to his son. Fatty, hasn't your dad told you? This house is mine, and even he's a son-in-law. 1. I woke up from a 10-year coma. Looking at the girl in front of me, I spoke incredulously. Eloise. The thin girl sobbed uncontrollably, burying her face in me and refusing to get up. A transparent panel floated in front of me, and lines of text scrolled rapidly. Celebrate the world. The heroine is awake. Poor little Eloise is finally going to have a mother. Blood TIs are truly a wonder. Even though my memory of the past 10 years was a blank slate, in my mind, my daughter was still learning to speak. Yet I recognized my child at a glance. Seeing her crying so hard that she was about to collapse, my heart ached as if it had been ripped open. I clumsily coaxed her, gently patting her back to comfort her. Don't be afraid, Mommy's here. The man standing beside me had red-rimmed eyes and turned his head away. I looked at him curiously. Edgar. Where's Dominic? Edgar was my neighbor, and Dominic was my husband. From the doctor's attitude towards him just now, I could guess that he had been paying for my medical expenses all these years. So where had Dominic gone? Mom, Dad, he... Edgar coughed lightly, interrupting Eloise's words, his gaze falling on my face. He's on a business trip. You should rest well first. You've been in a coma for so long, let the doctor examine you thoroughly later. The man's obvious abnormality made me realize he was lying. If the heroine knew that her wholeheartedly devoted husband is now a huge scumbag, she would be so heartbroken. Edgar is such a good person. Why not give him the identity of a gentle second male lead? My breathing quickened. What did he mean by becoming a scumbag? Was Dominic dead? Or had he cheated? After the two of them left the room, my eyes instantly turned cold. He better be dead. My skinny daughter, who had obvious malnutrition, had bruises on the inside of her collar that I could see when she cried. My daughter had been abused, and if he was still alive but didn't do anything about it, then he wouldn't be far from death. The examination results came out quickly. Because there had always been someone to take care of me while I was bedridden, my body was in good condition. After another half a month, I still hadn't seen Dominic, and calling his number was also a dead number. Thank you. I'll pay you back later. It's okay, I owe your mother a favor. It's only right. On the day I was discharged from the hospital, Edgar came to see me off. For some reason, I always felt that he was a bit strange. Eloise, let's go home. At the mention of home, my daughter's fingers tightened subconsciously, gripping the shoulder strap of her backpack. Mom, I want to eat first. Seeing her avoidance, the gloom in my heart deepened. I took her to the mall, and unexpectedly, she stopped in front of a hamburger shop, so I casually asked, "Do you want to eat?" The girl's eyes lit up with anticipation. Can I? Her humble look made my heart ache. Too. I had no appetite sitting in the restaurant. Looking at the 13-year-old girl across from me, she was pale and thin, and her body was very small, clearly suffering from long-term malnutrition. She looked even sicker than me, who had been bedridden for 10 years and survived on nutrient solution and liquid food. She was wolfing down her food as if the small piece of fried chicken in her hand was the most delicious thing she had ever eaten. Mom, why aren't you eating? Eloise handed me the fried chicken. I looked at her and forced a smile that was uglier than crying. Mommy isn't hungry, you eat. I turned my head to look out the window, and the transparent glass reflected my red-rimmed eyes. I remembered being knocked out on my way to sign a contract when Alois was only 3 years old. Even if I had been in a coma since then, the assets I left them would have been enough for Alois to squander for the rest of her life. However, the girl was wearing ill-fitting clothes and was timid around people, clearly not living well. The comments floating in front of me were all telling me that my daughter had been subjected to inhuman abuse. The heroine should go home quickly. Your former nanny is now living in your house, driving your car, spending your money and sleeping with your man. I took a deep breath. My former nanny, Quinn, you've done well. I kicked open the door, and the huge yard was brightly lit, just like when I left. I thought Dominic had squandered all my assets, otherwise how could my daughter have ended up like this? Mom, don't. The little girl's face turned pale, and she hurriedly pulled me. Where's Dominic? I pulled her and rushed inside regardless. Who is it? What are you shouting about? At this moment, a sharp female voice came. Hearing the familiar voice with a different tone, I raised an eyebrow. Miss Madeline. The owner of the voice was stunned when she saw me, and her arrogant and domineering demeanor disappeared instantly. And looking at her jeweled dress, I believed the comments even more. This was the nanny who had worked for my family for more than 10 years, and she was actually in my new house, dressed like this. I continued walking inside with Alois, and the fat woman blocked me, her expression panicked. Miss Madeline, how did you wake up? Why didn't you say anything? Let Mr. come to pick you up. I cupped my ear, pushed her away, and walked inside. Several people were eating in the dining room, with a piano piece playing to create a romantic atmosphere. The man was peeling shrimp for the woman, and the old man was gently rubbing the little boy's face to coax him to drink milk. What a heartwarming picture. It would be even more heartwarming if the man being peeled shrimp for wasn't my husband and the old man wasn't my father. Oh, you're eating? My voice was not loud, but it clearly reached the ears of several people. Dominic looked up in shock, clearly startled by me. Ghost! I walked forward quickly and slapped him across the face. Your mother's ghost, I'm not dead. Dominic was stunned by me. He covered his face and looked at me, retreating continuously. The woman next to him hurriedly helped him up. Dominic. Looking at the two miserable lovers who got up and supported each other, I couldn't help but clap my hands. As soon as the applause stopped, I said coldly, Quinn, what role are you playing in this game? She lowered her head and dared not look at me. Miss. Quinn was my nanny, but I always treated her like a sister. She grew up with my mother in my house since she was a child, and later when Dominic married me, I didn't ask her to move out. After all, it was just an extra room, and I felt more at ease with her taking care of Alois. However, I never expected that she would climb into my husband's bed while I was in a coma. 3. Dominic reacted, his face turning pale as he stepped forward. Madeline, listen to me explain, it's all a misunderstanding. The barrage of comments was flying. The heroine is so cool, kill this pair of dogs. Don't believe this scumbag anymore, he's trying to deceive you again. Look at your daughter. You bad woman. The boy next to him threw a piece of cake at me when he saw his mother being bullied. I turned to look at him. The little boy was chubby and looked only a couple of years younger than Alois. I squinted and looked him up and down, and the barrage of comments timely explained his identity to me. This is the little fat kid born to the dog man and woman. The heroine had just entered the hospital and they were already together. Oh, so he's a little bastard. I didn't hide my disgust and rolled my eyes. Where did this piglet come from? Why is it so ugly? Madeline! Don't talk so rudely. The old man's voice was full of energy, and he was very dissatisfied with me bullying his beloved grandson. Why didn't you notify your family when you woke up? Why are you making such a fuss as soon as you come back? Do you have any respect for me as your father? I looked in the direction of the voice, said nothing, and just stared at him. My father, Casper, looked increasingly flustered and took a couple of steps back. What do you want? You crazy girl, Madeline, do you still want to hit your own father? Another piece of cake was thrown over, and before I could react, a small body blocked me. Don't bully my mom. The girl screamed, standing in front of me, her small body trembling with fear. She was so scared, yet she still stood by my side without hesitation, and my eyes were slightly red. So you're her mother? I thought some crazy woman had run into my house. The boy folded his arms and looked at Alois. The mother of a little bitch is also a bitch, you should eat dog food like you. The next second, his mouth was covered, and the fat woman who had hurriedly run from the yard turned pale. Miss Madeline, the child doesn't know what he's talking about. However, I heard it clearly and keenly caught the keyword. Eating dog food? The pug not far away kept barking, and this time I didn't ignore it. The moment my eyes swept over, my breath caught. Next to the luxuriously decorated doghouse was a small table with a label that said, Alois exclusive. In an instant, the strings in my brain snapped completely. I felt all the blood in my body rushing to my head. 4. I had guessed that Alois wasn't having a good time at home, maybe because of Dominic's neglect and being bullied by the nanny. Perhaps because I was away for so long, she was being bullied at school. Or maybe Dominic found a new girlfriend who would bully her when Dominic was away. However, what I didn't expect was that the shabby little table was placed right next to the dog's bowl, directly opposite the dining table, where Dominic and Quinn could see it at a glance. While they were eating delicious food, they could see my daughter eating leftovers next to the dog, satisfying their own sick pleasure. No mother wouldn't go crazy seeing such a scene. I completely lost my mind and rushed towards Dominic. Dominic, I'm going to kill you. Madeline, listen to me explain. Seeing my frenzied look, Quinn hurriedly blocked Dominic. I pushed her away and kicked the man in the groin. His face changed drastically as he ducked down, but I used all my strength for this kick, and he howled and fell to the ground clutching his stomach. At that moment, anger had overwhelmed my reason, and I straddled him and frantically grabbed his neck. Are you even human? Even a tiger doesn't eat its cubs, how could you humiliate her like this? I never imagined that the gentle and considerate man I used to know was so vicious. I couldn't bear to think about what my child had been through in the past 10 years. Quinn was so scared by my appearance that she didn't get up for a long time. The little boy reacted and rushed forward to pull me. Let go of my dad. You bad woman. I turned around panting and looked at him, his neck shrank. You crazy woman. I'm going to have my dad kick you out. I sneered, grabbed the man's hair, who didn't even dare to fight back, and turned to him. Fatty, hasn't your dad told you? This house is mine, and even he's a son-in-law. I narrowed my eyes and only then noticed my father hugging my housekeeper tightly not far away. I looked at the boy's eyebrows and then at Quinn's pale face. There was no need to understand anymore, I couldn't help but laugh. This mother and daughter were here to curse me and my mother. No wonder Quinn had always eaten and worn the same things as me. My father told me it was because girls had stronger self-esteem, and our family didn't lack this little money. No wonder he, as a grandfather, could ignore his granddaughter eating dog food. I was like a demon crawling out of hell, walking towards them step by step. My father hugged the woman and retreated with a pale face. Madeline, what are you doing? I turned a deaf ear, my mind full of my mother's last words to me, to take care of my father. My mother was a strong woman, and she married my father, a pretty boy, very early. He had never suffered with my mother. Soon after, my mother became pregnant with me and hired a nanny to cook for my father. Unexpectedly, she ended up doing it on the bed. Thinking that Quinn was only a year younger than me, my heart turned cold. Aren't you afraid that your mother will come back to haunt you in the middle of the night? My voice was ethereal, echoing in the huge villa. Madeline, I'm your father, calm down. He kept backing away but still protected the nanny. I had already walked in front of them. I squatted down and looked at the already aged man. Have I been bad to you? Or has my mother been bad to you? 5. He's been supported by women all his life. First, by his wife, and later by his daughter. I thought he would be content, playing the role of a good husband and father. The 4 people in front of me, the nanny who had watched me grow up, my father, and Quinn who had grown up with me, and my husband, all knew me so well. I've always been a bit crazy, and now, in my rage, I've really scared them. Miss Madeline, it's not what you think. Quinn's mother swallowed and stepped forward to try to calm me down. You haven't eaten yet, have you? Why don't we sit down and have a good chat, and clear up any misunderstandings? Eat? She didn't mention it earlier, but the moment she did, I looked back at their dinner table. The woman thought I was hungry and breathed a sigh of relief. Miss Madeline, please sit down first. I'll go make your favorite dish right now. You used to love the food I made the most. The next second she screamed and ran to the corner. Because I had flipped the table. The dishes and chopsticks scattered all over the floor, making a loud noise, and my daughter Eloise trembled with fear. I took a deep breath and pulled her into my arms, covering her ears. Eat? Are you worthy of eating with me? I turned my gaze to the 2 pairs of people who were hugging each other in fear. Being a mistress and loving to make a mess is your fate. Using my money, living in my house, and daring to treat my daughter like this. Do you really think I won't wake up? Bitch and dog, a pair of old bitches and 2 dirty men. It makes me sick to talk to you for even a second. Dominic had already gotten up from the ground. He looked at his wife and child being knocked to the ground and mustered up the courage to confront me. Madeline, I admit I'm sorry to you, but how can you flip the table? And you're talking so rudely, there's a child present. I slapped him across the face. Why didn't you care about how ugly it looked when you were doing it? Now you think it's too harsh? Mom, I'm scared. My daughter looked up at me, her doe-like eyes were wet, and my heart ached. Get out, don't dirty my daughter's eyes anymore, get out of my sight immediately. After hearing my words, Dominic wanted to say something else, but Quinn hurriedly pulled him towards the door. I'm not leaving. The little fat boy cried out at this moment. This is my house, why don't you leave and let me stay? He cried loudly and started rolling around on the ground. It seemed like he had used this trick a lot. Dad, Mom, hurry up and kick them out. I took my hand away from my daughter's ears and gently rubbed her head. Be good, don't be afraid, watch how Mommy gets revenge for you. My daughter looked at me, seemingly understanding. Quinn was so scared that she was dumbfounded and hurriedly blocked the little fat boy. Miss Madeline, please, don't be so petty with a child. We're leaving, we're leaving. I looked at her coldly and begged. It's too late. Quinn, why are you pretending to be a timid and weak little white flower? How come you weren't afraid when you climbed into my husband's bed? How could you not think of her as a child when you made my daughter eat from a dog bowl? I pushed her away and pulled the little fat boy towards the dog. 6. Quinn no longer pretended and screamed as she tried to grab me. The others also tried to pull me. I stopped and scanned them, and they all stopped in unison, hesitating to come forward. I said coldly, touch me, and none of you will be able to leave my house today. Sister, I beg you, don't do anything to the child. She was trembling all over, as if the bruises on my daughter didn't come from her hands. I took the dog bowl and filled it with some of the food that had just been overturned on the floor, and forced the little fat boy to eat. Dad! Mom! The little fat boy struggled like a piglet about to be slaughtered. Enough! Dominic shouted, reaching forward and grabbing my wrist. Madeline, don't torture the child like this. The few people cowering in the corner were watching, but dared not make a move. I glanced at my daughter who was looking at me timidly, took a deep breath. Disappear from my sight in 3 seconds. Quinn, as if relieved, rushed forward and hugged the little fat boy, and the group of them left in a hurry. With the little fat boy crying and howling, they left. I quickly hugged my daughter and patted her back to comfort her. Eloise, be good, don't be afraid, Mommy has driven the bad guys away. Feeling the small body in my arms gradually relax, a few lines of comments floated in front of me. Just let them go like that. Just now the heroine looked so fierce, but I didn't expect her to be so saintly. Saintly? Me? Impossible. I sneered inwardly. If I hadn't been afraid of scaring Aloys tonight, none of them would have been able to leave. I would make them pay tenfold for the pain they had inflicted on my daughter for the past 10 years. Mom is here, Aloys is not afraid. The girl leaned against me, blinked her eyes and touched my face, looking at me worriedly. I realized I had tears streaming down my face and quickly wiped them away. I just took a nap, and my kind and gentle father and my considerate husband had all changed their appearance. They were like man-eating demons, devouring my most cherished daughter in this world. I'm sorry, Mommy shouldn't. I whimpered, almost unable to speak. I originally thought I had missed her childhood, but now I realized that she didn't have a childhood at all without me. Mom, it's not your fault. Aloys hugged me back, her small hand gently patting me, her eyes red. Tears are flowing, it's so pitiful, the heroine should be more vigilant, that Quinn is not a good person. I lowered my eyes, if she dared to come, I wouldn't let her go. That night when I went to bed, the little girl curled up in my arms, hugging the rag doll I had casually bought for her. She tried to smile, and I felt a pang of heartache. This house was full of traces of those dirty things living here. I felt dirty and took my daughter to a hotel. As I expected, Dominic and my father, two useless good-for-nothing white-faced men, had already sold my company. They had no ability to manage it at all, and they had been living off my old capital for so long. Mom, can you take me to school tomorrow? My daughter's eyes lit up. This was the first time she had slept on such a soft bed since she could remember, and her little face was flushed with excitement. Of course, Mommy will take you every day. I kissed her forehead, but tears couldn't stop flowing. Early the next morning, after sending my daughter to school, I started to take care of my remaining assets. I couldn't find any evidence of the money Dominic had spent on Quinn and the little fat boy during my coma, so I could only liquidate my existing assets first. As soon as I put the house up for sale, I received a call. Miss Madeline, we found a sneaky woman in your house. No, Hearing the familiar voice on the other end, I curled my lips. I hadn't gone to find her yet, but she had come to me on her own. The female supporting character is so stupid, she came back to steal things at such a critical moment, waiting for the heroine to deal with her. 7. I returned to the villa and sat on the sofa, glancing at her sideways. Quinn's eyes widened in terror, and she involuntarily backed away, but was pushed back towards me by the bodyguard. Madeline, I'm just here to get some stuff. The woman stammered, her fingers digging deeply into the ground. She had dared to come in only after seeing Madeline leave with that little bitch. She thought it was simple. Madeline had arrived so suddenly yesterday that she hadn't had time to react. She had quite a few pieces of jewelry over the years, and she took the opportunity to take them back while Madeline was out. She knew Madeline best. Madeline usually didn't like to wear gold or silver, and she wouldn't look at those jewelry of hers. So even if she stole them, no one would know. The heroine is so prepared, she arranged for bodyguards to be waiting in the house yesterday to catch her. It's hilarious. Let me see how this female supporting character is going to make up a story. Quinn, do you think you're the only one who knows me, and I don't know you? I picked up the magazine on the table and gently slapped her face with it. You still haven't changed your thieving habit after all these years. My words irritated her, and she couldn't help but retort. I'm taking my own things, how can that be called stealing? I slapped the magazine across her face. Is that your money? She looked up stubbornly like a weak little white flower. Tsk, you cry so beautifully. I lifted her chin. Seeing the bloodthirsty look in my eyes, her pupils shrank. What are you going to do? She's panicking. It's so funny, now she remembers how crazy the heroine used to be. How could she forget when she was taking things from others? I stole something, just call the police. She looked terrified, her voice trembling. Call the police, I'm a thief. Quickly find someone to arrest me. How cheap would that be for you? I shook my head. No, I've already thought of a punishment for you. I showed her the photos one by one. Familiar? The photos showed a girl covered in bruises, with no good flesh on her body except her head. She couldn't help but shake her head and back away. I don't know, I don't recognize her, don't show me. I pulled her back. Take a closer look, you won't not recognize her, will you? These were the scars on my daughter Eloy's bruises, burns, and scars all over her body. Some were new injuries, and some were old scars. I clapped my hands lightly, and 3 men came in. You want to insult me? Do you know that's against the law? Quinn seemed to have already figured out how to call the police, and I raised an eyebrow. No, I just want you to get a tattoo. Hearing this, Quinn's face changed instantly. Madeline! You bitch! Ah! Let me go! Wow, the heroine is really crazy. What does this mean? She's going to have the female supporting character tattooed with the marks she used to torture Eloise. She deserves it. This bullet comment is pretty smart. I directed the men forward. Remember to tattoo it according to this. Oh, by the way. I looked at the woman who had been stripped of her clothes and smiled gently. Don't use anesthetic, hold her down, enjoy it. I specially found a kind of tattoo that can't be washed off. Quinn struggled even harder when she heard this. Madeline! You bitch! Ah! Let me go! How am I going to face people? Those scars on your daughter can still disappear, why won't you let me go? I gently placed my hand on my mouth. Keep your voice down, if you're willing to let your son replace you, I can let you go. Her chest heaved violently, and her whole body trembled in pain. 8. I led my daughter into our new home. Her eyes sparkled with an undisguised joy. Mommy, is this my room? I looked at her tenderly, my eyes filled with affection. Does Eloise like it? You'll have your own room now. I love it. Eloise's face flushed with excitement. Then she thought of something and bit her lip. Can I still sleep with Mommy? Of course. I couldn't help but smile. My daughter threw her arms around me happily. Mommy, you're so good to me. I sighed. Was this enough? Mommy, are you free this week? I want to go to the zoo, I've never been. The girl's voice grew quieter until I couldn't hear it anymore. My heart ached. I immediately decided to take her. I wanted to make up for all the things she'd missed out on in the past 10 years. On Sunday, my daughter woke up early. I took her to the zoo she'd been dreaming of. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, taking in everything around her. Mommy! That big tiger is so cool! What's so fun about this? I'm so bored of these animals. 2 voices overlapped. I lifted my eyelids slightly to look over. Eloise's face turned pale as she looked at the 2 people on the other side. Daddy! Disappointment filled my daughter's eyes. She couldn't understand why her father didn't love her. Daddy takes my little brother out to play every weekend, I don't know where they go. I patted her head. That fat slob isn't your brother. Your mom and I couldn't produce something so ugly. My daughter hadn't even been to the zoo once in all these years, yet he used my money to buy an annual pass for his mistress's child. Quinn must have been quite scared by me, because he wasn't with them. Dominic had come with the little fat kid. The little fat kid was throwing a tantrum, and Dominic was getting impatient. Looking at the spot where the 2 of them were standing, I got an idea. Eloise, Mommy wants ice cream. I stuffed money into my daughter's hand and patted her little bottom, urging her on. Strawberry, go buy one. My daughter was simple-minded and didn't suspect anything. She obediently took the money and turned to leave. It was a Sunday, the sun was blazing, and there were crowds of people everywhere, all parents bringing their children to see the animals. Looking at the tiger napping under the fake rock, I strode towards the two men with light steps. This zoo had nothing else, but it did have a lot of tigers. It was a case of more monks than meat, and looking at that belly, it could probably do with an extra meal. "Your mom's in a bad mood lately, don't make a fuss at home." The man was gently coaxing the bear child, like a good husband and father. Who would have thought that his real wife was standing behind him, looking at him coldly? The man let out a blood-curdling scream that drew a crowd. The little fat kid's face, which had just been sunburned, was now pale with fright. "Daddy! Someone fell! Someone fell!" The crowd was in an uproar, and many people took out their phones to film. "Quick, get up! The tiger's coming! Where's the staff?" Many enthusiastic onlookers shouted anxiously at the bottom, but the fake rock was so high that Dominic had already lost consciousness after the fall. As soon as he raised his head, he saw that several tigers had been attracted by the commotion and were approaching step by step. Dominic was terrified and tried to get up and run away, but his legs were weak and he could only support himself with his wrist and back away. "Don't come here! Don't come here!" The tigers didn't listen to him at all and had already assumed a hunting posture. The man wet his pants, and a foul smell came from him. He was so scared that he had peed his pants. The strong smell further stimulated the tigers, and they pounced without hesitation. A scream rang out. 9. "Mommy, why is it so noisy over there?" My daughter handed me the strawberry ice cream. "Nothing much, let's go see the pandas." I replied, licking the tip of the ice cream cone contentedly. I felt my scalp go numb. The female lead just pushed him down without a second thought, not even worried about the surveillance cameras. That was satisfying. I hope he doesn't die. If he dies, so be it. A scumbag like that is a nuisance alive. Why bother with such details in a novel? A group of people ran towards where we were. "Quick! Quick! Look! A man fell into the tiger enclosure. Oh my God, the tiger bit his, you know what off." Thankfully the staff got there in time, but the man's left leg and, well, you know, are gone. Ugh, gross. I covered my daughter's ears and quickly walked away. The next day, while dropping my daughter off at school, I saw that little fat kid on the way back. He was carrying his own backpack, his eyes red and swollen as he glared at me. "It's all your fault, you bad woman. You bitch. You jinx." I looked at him sideways. "Why didn't your parents come to send you to school today?" Even if he ate a lot and was bulky, he was still just a kid. "Go away. Go away. You're the bad woman who kicked me out of the house. My mom and dad haven't smiled since you showed up. Woo woo." I didn't intend to argue with a child, but I felt mischievous and wanted to tease him. "If your parents don't send you to school, it means they don't love you. How can you blame me?" His eyes were red-rimmed and he threw his backpack at me. "It's all your fault. You're just like that little bitch." My expression turned cold, and I turned around and threw the backpack he threw at me into the nearby river. With a splash, the little fat kid stared dumbfounded, then his whole body collapsed. "Give me back my backpack," he cried, trying to hit me, but I turned and left. The little fat kid chased after me relentlessly. He was even more persistent than his parents. He was truly a fearless young calf. My eyes rolled. "It's already thrown away, so what can we do? I'll testify with you to the teacher, okay?" Tears welled up in the little fat kid's eyes, making him look rather comical. He believed me, sniffling. "Teacher, this is my aunt. She had an argument with me and threw my backpack into the river." He gritted his teeth and framed me. The young teacher looked at me disapprovingly, probably thinking I was a parent who was covering for my child. I shook my head and spoke sincerely. "Teacher, I don't know this child." The little fat kid was completely dumbfounded and looked at the teacher with a sullen expression. He burst into tears. I stifled my laughter and continued. "He gave me $20 on the road and asked me to lie for him, but I think it's good to turn over a new leaf." I put the $20 in the teacher's hand. It was the money left over from buying my daughter breakfast this morning. Patting the little fat kid's shoulder, I turned and ran. Behind me was the little fat kid's choked up rebuttal and the teacher's stern questioning. Bruno! You actually lied to the teacher? You're getting more and more out of control. Let this brat be scolded. Apparently, his mother hadn't told him that Aunt Madeline was someone to be feared. I was feeling good going home, but someone kept coming to ruin my mood. 10. Madeline, for the sake of being father and daughter, please let our family go. The aged man knelt before me, his tone filled with reproach despite his plea. I am your father, after all. I raised you. Why are you still making things difficult for me? As my father, he knew me best. Even if there was no evidence for Dominic's affair, Quinn had been depressed lately, hiding at home and refusing to see anyone. He also knew that this was inseparable from his eldest daughter. I looked at him mockingly. What a good father and husband he was. My mother had loved him all her life, thinking of him until her dying breath. Yet, her always cowardly and incompetent husband was now pleading for mercy for his out-of-wedlock daughter and mistress. What an irony. An indescribable pain welled up in my heart. I truly had considered him my father when he held me high in the air. However, I never imagined that after I fell unconscious, he didn't even give my daughter a decent meal, not even out of respect for my mother. You can go back. I won't trouble you anymore. Just get as far away as possible. Casper's eyes lit up, and he looked at me incredulously. Really? It must be said that a father knows his son best. Since I was young, if someone slapped me, I would slap them back twice as hard. They had tormented my daughter for 10 years, how could I let them have an easy life? But looking at his gray hair and deep wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, I pursed my lips. I smiled lightly. I could let him go, but his wife might not. Casper, Dominic, and Quinn's mother moved to their old neighborhood. The two freeloaders had no skills. Quinn hid in his room and refused to go out, while Dominic was confined to the master bedroom. He no longer had a lower body, having been swallowed by a tiger. He was no longer a complete man. His other leg had been reattached, but he still had a limp and stayed at home all day. The little fat kid was making a fuss in the house. All my classmates have one. I don't have any. Not even a small airplane. Quinn's mother felt sorry for her grandson and couldn't help but urge Casper. Can't you go to work? Our family can't just rely on me. Casper's face turned green. He had never worked a day in his life, having been pampered by women. Now, at such an old age, he was being asked to go out and suffer. Why don't you go? You're young and strong. He glanced towards the bedroom where Dominic was lying half dead. Keep your voice down. How can Dominic go to work like this? Quinn's mother quickly pulled him back, afraid of causing trouble. I want a plane. I want a plane. The little fat kid kept crying, and Quinn's mother could only coax him. Okay, Grandma will buy you one. However, Casper, who had always doted on his grandson, frowned. Buy what? How much money do we have left to buy for him? Quinn's mother was also angry. You're always complaining about no money. Then go out and earn some. Me go out and earn? I've never worked a day in my life. What am I supposed to do? Casper slammed the table. What's wrong with doing something? It's better than you dancing with those old ladies all day. Quinn's mother retorted. The elderly people's entertainment was limited to dancing together. Quinn's mother had been resentful for a long time, as she was going out to find work every day to support the family, while Casper was dancing with the old ladies downstairs. Their argument grew louder and louder. But the bedroom door was tightly shut, as if there were only two old people in the house. In the end, the two parted ways unhappily. After hearing Casper's words, I didn't bother them anymore. I even secretly recommended a suitable job to Quinn's mother to help them improve their financial situation. Seeing the high salary, the old lady was overjoyed. However, when she returned home, she saw Casper downstairs, dancing with the neighbor's old lady. She was an old woman, but she still had to go out to work to support the family, and even had 2 men to take care of. Quinn's mother became angrier and angrier, and the atmosphere in the house reached a freezing point. With the first month's salary, after deducting daily expenses, the biggest expenditure was the 2 men's cigarettes and alcohol. Quinn's mother finally broke down. Seeing Casper dressed up and about to go out dancing, she rushed into her daughter's bedroom. 11. Screams of a woman and a man echoed from inside the room. A long absent light shone into the room, and the woman huddled in the corner, clutching her neck. Quinn's mother averted her gaze with difficulty, looking at the dark purple tattoos covering her daughter's body. Dominic, on the other hand, pulled the covers over himself and looked away disdainfully. "Mom! What are you doing?" Quinn's eyes were sunken, and her hair, not washed in a long time, smelled foul. "Mom is taking you and little treasure away." Quinn's mother gritted her teeth. "These 2 men are useless. They're just a burden on us, mother and daughter." Quinn didn't work either, but they were her blood relatives. She had already made up her mind. Now that her salary was so high, she would take Quinn and start a new life, supporting little treasure together. These 2 freeloaders had nothing to do with her. "Woo-woo, my plane broke." The little fat boy was startled and the toy plane he was holding shattered. It was something he had begged for a long time, and he cried loudly in heartbreak. "What are you going crazy about? You want to leave me now? When I was buying you jewelry, you didn't think I was useless." Casper was also angry. The woman who had always been gentle and considerate was now saying he was useless in front of the whole family. "You're so old, relying on a woman to support you. Who else should I scold if not you?" Quinn's mother had been accumulating her emotions for a long time and finally exploded. Casper had nothing to say about Quinn's mother supporting the family, so he could only find other excuses. "If it weren't for you and your daughter, my daughter Madeline could have supported me for the rest of my life. It's all because of you." He pointed at the bedroom. "I'm old, the one who should be working is that young and strong one. Why don't you say anything about him staying at home all day?" Quinn's mother pulled the little fat boy and Quinn, trying to push past Casper. "What's the point of comparing to useless people? You're an old waste, and he's a useless cripple." The little fat boy was pulled and cried loudly, not forgetting his plane. "My plane, woo-woo!" Quinn stood aside numbly, looking at herself in the mirror. From her neck down, her arms everywhere was covered in tattoos. She screamed and scrubbed her arms, but she couldn't rub them off, and the scene was chaotic. In the small house, the arguments of men and women, the cries of children, and the screams of young women. No one noticed the young man who stumbled out of the open bedroom. He numbly walked to the kitchen and grabbed a knife, the surrounding sounds becoming sensitive words in his ears. "Useless man! Cripple! My plane is gone! That cripple!" Sirens wailed, and the police pushed open the door and gasped. The next day, as I was taking my daughter to school, a message popped up on my phone. Breaking news. A family of 5 was found dead in a brutal murder case in our city. I sat calmly at the police station, and the police officer pushed up his glasses. My high level of cooperation made the police very satisfied, and they even expressed sympathy for my husband and father having families outside. They brought in forensic experts for various examinations, and the final conclusion was that the young man had stabbed all 4 people to death with a knife, not even sparing the child. In the end, he seemed to have gone mad and stabbed himself several times before collapsing in a pool of blood. The case was so bizarre and bloody that it caused a stir in the city. I had no possibility of committing the crime and was released after being questioned. My daughter pouted, unhappy. She could now express her little emotions to me, unlike when we first met when she was so restrained and timid. "Why are you so late today? You promised to take me to eat the rice noodle shop at the door, but it's closed now." I rubbed her head, my heart softened. "Mommy's bad, how about tomorrow?" My daughter was happy again and held my hand as we walked home. "Okay, Let's eat together tomorrow.